Happy Monday, folks. We have just a handful of transits to talk about this week, a couple on the more challenging side of things, a couple on the more pleasant side. And then we're ending this week with a full moon in Sagittarius, which is an excellent time to release a limiting belief. So that's something to consider as we go through the week here, and to keep in mind as we talk about the transits building up to Sunday, so you can figure out what that belief is for you that you'd like to release. Now, today is Monday, May 25th, and this morning, the moon entered relational, artistic, balanced Libra. And then tonight, or actually just after midnight tomorrow morning, for you all on the East Coast, we have one of those challenging transits that I mentioned, with Mars squaring Pluto from 5 degrees of Taurus to 5 degrees of Aquarius. This is a challenging aspect between two challenging planets. So it's probably going to be pretty challenging, pretty uncomfortable, and we've already sort of been feeling this energy building up to this evening. With this transit, we have the friction of a square between two stubborn fixed signs, neither of which really wants to budge, traditional Taurus and then innovative Aquarius. So with Mars and Pluto squaring each other from these signs, we may be experiencing power struggles around ego, maybe around sexuality. We can definitely anticipate some fights, some conflict. And I think you want to be careful under this transit of not trying to force somebody to see or understand or acknowledge something that they're not open or ready for. We can make progress in those areas under this transit, but not if we're applying too much force to our interactions. But if we're talking about how you're working internally within yourself, with this transit, you might be able to uncover something deep in your subconscious that's been sapping your energy. So this can be helpful if we approach it through intentional shadow work, facing our fears. We can work through some kind of blockage and access more empowerment, and maybe discover something to release under that full moon on Sunday. So that shows how there are some helpful aspects to challenging planets and transits like this. We could also see this Mars square to Pluto as an opportunity to bravely face corrupt systems of power and fighting that good fight for liberation, which is challenging, of course, to do, but very important, right? So that's today. Then tomorrow, Tuesday, May 26th, we have a much more pleasant Pluto transit with the sun trining Pluto from 5 degrees of Gemini to 5 degrees of Aquarius. So this is still related to those transformational and alchemical processes of Pluto and the revolutionary, liberatory energy of Aquarius. But now that transformation is less forced. It's flowing more easily and more naturally. But that also means that this is one of those transits that could be easier to just ignore and let it pass by unless we choose to tap into it. Now, Pluto is always inherently related to threatening truths, survival mechanisms, repressed psychological wounds. So it's never like a super fun time. But now this trine can help us to access that deep healing of Pluto a little bit more easily. So Tuesday is a great day to work on the mental plane, changing your mind, transforming your thoughts and ideas, deepening your communication, empowering your voice. And then the sun in Gemini brings this flexibility, adaptability, curiosity, and learning energized by the sun. So this transit is an invitation to reorient our energy from that scattered Gemini stuff we were talking about last week toward Pluto, which asks, what is really of urgent importance in your life? What priorities are you going to look back on from your deathbed and try to really streamline from that perspective? And of course, this transit might also help us to kickstart some kind of process of release for Sunday's full moon. Then on Wednesday, May 27th, the moon moves into Pluto's home sign of spooky, sultry, secretive Scorpio in the evening. And then the evening of Thursday, May 28th is going to bring us the other really challenging transit of this week, which is a Venus square to Saturn from exactly 12 degrees of Cancer to 12 degrees of Aries. Now, this repeats some of the themes I discussed last week when Venus was squaring Neptune. So we have that Aries call toward brave, risky action conflicting with that Cancerian desire to kind of just retreat and hide under the covers. But now with Venus squaring Saturn, we might be feeling more tense, stiff, tight, and like unbalanced, dysregulated, maybe even kind of pessimistic and hopeless and despairing. This is the kind of transit that can really activate a scarcity mindset around finances and resources. It might bring up some creative blockages to work through. It could indicate struggles between the structures of society represented by Saturn and justice, equality, the rights of femmes and queer and trans folks as represented by Neptune. And of course, this transit could be also very challenging in our personal relationships, activating feelings of loneliness, isolation, restriction, scarcity. So depending on who you are and what you're going through right now, it might be helpful actually to choose some intentional solitude around this day, or on the other hand, to work on overcoming the obstacle of reaching out to other people if that's more the kind of work you need to do. Either way, though, we can harness some of that Saturn energy to work through challenges in these Venus areas of our lives, thinking about long-term commitment, maturation, and the hard work it takes to build and grow. And once again, this transit might help us to identify some limiting beliefs to release under the full moon this weekend. There's nothing to report here on Friday, May 25th. And then on the morning of Saturday, May 30th, the moon will move into expansive, adventurous, philosophical Sagittarius, which brings us to Sunday, May 31st. In the early morning, we'll have that full moon at 10 degrees of Sagittarius with the sun opposite the zodiac, of course, at 10 degrees of Gemini. As always, a full moon is the peak of the lunar cycle, bringing heightened emotions that are more fully illuminated for reflection. It's a time to think back on the intentions and seeds that you planted 2 weeks ago during that new moon in Taurus, and to check in on the progress of those goals, recalibrate, pull any weeds that are springing up around those little seedlings. Thinking about Sagittarius, this is the sign of beliefs, philosophy, religion, higher education, law, publishing, foreign travel, and big adventures. Anything that has to do with expanding our big picture perspective and worldview. Think about the archer's arrow, the symbol of Sagittarius, flying over the landscape and seeing everything from that bird's eye perspective, right? And then a full moon, as you may know, is a great time to release pretty much anything. Ergo, this Sagittarius full moon is an opportunity to release a limiting belief that's holding you back in life. Now, that limiting belief could be related to the Taurus new moon that started this cycle. Maybe it has something to do with your values, your relationship to resources, to your own physical body, or to your sense of self-worth. That could also be something that you uncovered over the course of the week, or something personal based on what's happening in your own life, your own birth chart. And this full moon will really be helped along by all of the outer transpersonal planets. The planet Uranus will be opposite the full moon right next to the sun, and that'll help to shake us awake, help to connect with our authentic selves, to liberate more easily from our limitations, so that helps. This full moon will be in a trine to Saturn and Neptune in Aries, bringing more of a flow of courage, action, and change. This full moon will also be sextile to Pluto in Aquarius, and that stimulates more depth, transformation, and empowerment like we've been talking about with the Pluto transits this week. Finally, this full moon will be square to the lunar nodes, and that's a bit more of a challenging aspect, but it means that this full moon can actually be a helpful step in our collective spiritual evolution as the lunar nodes are getting ready to move out of Virgo and Pisces this summer. So one of the final chances to wrap up some lessons there. Now, one other transit is happening this day on Sunday evening that will help us with our full moon magics, and that is a Mercury sextile to Chiron from 29 degrees of Gemini to 29 degrees of Aries. This kind of transit helps to stimulate healing through the mercurial activities of thinking, writing, and talking in our communities, in our various platonic relationships. And Mercury rules Gemini, where the sun currently is. And Chiron is a centaur connected to the sign of Sagittarius, where the moon is for this full moon. So this is just a great combination to help tie everything together, to help us release limiting beliefs, invite in more spaciousness, healing, compassion, and wisdom into our lives. So, happy full moon. That's it for this week's astrological weather report. I'm Alice Pope. Logan, back to you.